He walked in wearing an FBI badge, but 7 minutes later, he was sitting on the floor, surrounded by cops, treated like a threat. Why? Because of a phone call. What happens next will shock you, and reveal how silence can be the loudest form of prejudice. Tuesday morning at Ashgrove Corporate Plaza, Riverdale, Maryland. The clock in the main lobby had just ticked over to 10:16 a.m. There was nothing remarkable about this place, a sterile space wrapped in glass, concrete, and the lingering scent of stale coffee. Gray leather chairs lined up in rows, plastic plants stood neatly in white ceramic pots, and at the crescent-shaped reception desk, Brooke Manning, the new administrative assistant, typed away, unbothered by anyone around her. Everything was quiet. Until Darius Bennett walked in. He didn't make a scene. He wasn't in a hurry. Just a black man in a buttoned-up shirt, dark jeans, and a black laptop bag slung across his shoulder. At 40, Darius carried the calm of someone who had walked through many rooms filled with judgment and never let it strip him of his presence. He passed through the glass doors, nodded at the security guard, and received in return a glance as cold as the polished stone floor. Darius didn't flinch. He was used to glances like that, quick looks that slid away just as fast, as if his presence were something that needed to be managed. He chose a spot near the wall, pulled out his phone, scrolling through documents while taking quiet instructions through a sleek Bluetooth earpiece. His voice was low, deep, and steady, nearly a whisper. No one in the lobby could hear what he was saying. Brooke Manning looked up, her brows furrowing. She saw a black man, standing alone, not sitting, not speaking to anyone but himself through an earpiece. Her mind started stitching together fragments, dark clothes, Bluetooth, sharp eyes, the way he stood by the wall like he was watching something. She whispered to the coworker beside her. "Do you know who that guy is?" The woman looked up briefly, shook her head, and returned to her screen. But Brooke didn't let it go. She leaned forward, hand already on the desk phone. A whispered tone, as if doing something responsible. "Security, hi, there's a black man standing near the wall, kind of looks suspicious, talking to himself. I'm not sure, but maybe it's worth checking." And from the phone, she uttered just two key words, suspicious behavior. That alone was enough to set the gears turning. On the fourth floor, a team of technicians from Verity Core Solutions was preparing for a meeting, the very meeting Darius had come for. They had no idea that, down in the lobby, the federal lead investigator on their case was about to become a suspect in the very building he was scheduled to oversee. And Darius Bennett? He remained exactly where he was. Calm. Unaware that within the next 7 minutes, his entire world would pivot because of a dangerous blend of bias and silence. On the internal security monitor, Brooke Manning had just ended her call. Though she tried to keep a neutral expression, her fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't sure if she had done the right thing, or if she had just responded to a reflex, one fed by the nightly news, by a lifetime of subtle indoctrination about who looks out of place, and why. "He's standing alone, didn't check in, and keeps mumbling into his earpiece," Brooke murmured, trying to reassure herself that she'd done the right thing. But what she didn't know, or didn't want to confront, was that sometimes a harmless call can have consequences that stretch far beyond the end of a workday. Down in the basement garage, officers Travis Knox and Arena Haight of the Riverdale County Patrol had just received a dispatch. Black male, approximately 40s, suspicious behavior, standing in the lobby of Ashgrove building. No weapons, no threat reported. Call came from front desk. Travis nodded, tightened his belt, his face carrying the same no-nonsense expression he wore for every call-out. He was the kind of cop who was always ready, even for the vaguest of scenarios. Arena was different, cautious, quietly checking her body cam, mindful not to let emotion drive her response. "A guy standing around with Bluetooth is now considered suspicious?" Arena muttered. "We check. We don't judge," Travis replied, eyes locked on the building's entrance. 2 minutes later, their cruiser rolled slowly over the gravel loop and stopped at the main doors. Through the glass, they saw Darius Bennett still standing calmly, eyes on his phone, earpiece in place. At first glance, nothing threatening. But bias has a way of painting danger where there is none. Behind the reception desk, Brooke stood with arms folded, posture stiff like she was waiting for someone to validate her timely alert. Darius had no idea he'd just become the subject of an internal radio dispatch. The glass revolving door slowly rotated open. "Sir, we need you to stop what you're doing and speak with us for a moment," Travis's voice cut through the lobby, firm, commanding. Darius looked up. Under the overhead lights, his eyes held surprise, sharp and unmasked. "What's this about?" "I'm Agent Bennett, FBI. I'm here for a meeting with Verity Corps." "I'll need to see some ID," Travis said, his hand hovering a little too close to his holster. "Sure, I'm reaching for it now, in my bag." "Don't reach, sir." The air froze. Darius paused, both hands midair. His eyes remained steady, but his voice dropped lower, measured, controlled. "I'm following procedure. I'm not reaching for a weapon. Just trying to show you my credentials." A long beat passed. Then Irina stepped forward, her voice noticeably softer. "Sir, would you mind setting your bag down and opening it slowly?" Darius crouched down, unzipped the bag with slow, deliberate movements, his hands never gripping anything tight. "The badge is in the side pocket. If you feel safer, you are welcome to retrieve it yourself." Silence. Only eyes, wide and unblinking, filled the room. The tension thickened the air like fog. Irina stepped forward cautiously. Her hand reached into the bag. The zipper clicked open, and the badge glinted under the overhead lights. FBI, photo ID, name, badge number. Everything was valid. But Travis didn't move. He didn't verify it. He didn't speak. He didn't yet realize he had 5 minutes left to decide who he would be in this story. The crackle of police radio echoed from Travis's shoulder mic as he took a quiet step back, eyes still locked on Darius Bennett, the man who had just presented a valid federal ID but was still being treated as a threat cloaked in a buttoned-up shirt. Before anyone could respond, the revolving door spun open again. A second patrol unit entered, Eric Dalton, 36, broad-shouldered, with default alert eyes, and Naomi Vega, 33, composed face but no less vigilant. They had been dispatched after an internal escalation call placed by Brooke Manning, who, feeling the first 2 officers were too green, had requested more experienced backup. Dalton's eyes swept across the lobby the moment he walked in, quickly landing on Darius, still seated, hands resting on his knees, his open bag displaying the gleaming FBI badge inside. "Is this the guy?" Dalton asked, voice low and rumbling. "Yeah," Travis replied. "Claims he's a federal agent." "Not claims," Darius interjected, his voice still even. "I've presented my credentials and am ready to confirm my identity. You can call the D.C. field office directly. Ask for Agent Camilla Stone." "Are you armed?" Naomi Vega asked, eyes never leaving the bag. Darius nodded. "Yes. Glock 19, right hip, bureau issued. I have no intention of drawing it unless instructed to." "Then keep doing exactly what you're doing," Dalton cut in. "Hands on knees. Stay put." "What exactly do you suspect me of, Officer Dalton?" Darius asked, evenly. "No suspicion. Just protocol for a reported individual acting strangely in a secure building." At that, Naomi Vega stepped up and carefully examined the badge in Irina's hand. Her expression flickered with something that looked like hesitation. "Everything matches," Vega murmured to Irina. "Photo checks out. Signature. Serial ID. Even the embedded verification chip. Then why am I still sitting here like a suspect?" Darius asked again, this time with a voice weighted not by anger, but by exhaustion. "I arrived on time. At the right place. With every legal right to be here. And I'm treated like I'm only here because—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The air in the lobby was saturated with what went unspoken. Behind the reception desk, Brooke Manning stood frozen. She stared out through the glass doors, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Dalton opened his mouth to respond, but stopped when his radio crackled again. The confirmation had come through. Darius Bennett, age 40, senior FBI investigative agent, cleared for a scheduled data audit meeting with Verity Corp. Naomi Vega straightened up, gently tightening her grip on the badge in her hand, then stepped closer to Darius. "I'm sorry, Agent Bennett. We should have verified sooner." "Yes," Darius replied, his eyes no longer calm. "And you should have asked me. Not handled me." From the far corner of the lobby, the elevator dinged, a soft chime slicing through the silence as its metal doors parted. And out stepped someone who would flip the entire narrative. A woman with blazing red hair and a sharply tailored business suit walked out, an FBI badge clipped to her jacket. Miranda Carter, 43, supervisory special agent from the D.C. field office, carried a hot coffee in one hand and a leather portfolio pressed against her chest. But when her eyes scanned the lobby, catching sight of Darius sitting on the ground, unarmed, his gaze steady amid a ring of officers, her steps halted. Her breath hitched. And then her voice cut through the air like ice. "What the hell is going on here?" The entire lobby froze. Naomi Vega was the first to turn. "Excuse me, and you are?" Miranda marched forward, flashing her badge. "Supervisory Special Agent Miranda Carter, FBI DC. And this," she pointed at Darius, "is Agent Bennett, the person I personally assigned to present our cybersecurity investigation findings to Verity Corp." Dalton's mouth opened but no words came out. Naomi quickly handed Darius's badge back to Miranda, her tone low with deference. "All credentials check out, Agent Carter." Miranda didn't look at Vega. Her eyes fixed on Travis Knox, who was standing stiff as a statue. "How many times did he tell you he was a federal agent before being forced to the ground?" Darius spoke up, his voice even but laced with cold steel. "4 times. Clearly. And not once was I believed." Miranda clenched her portfolio tighter, then nodded to Darius. "You can stand." Darius said nothing. He rose slowly, brushed invisible dust from his dark slacks. But his gaze remained steady, holding a calmness that was both polite and painfully familiar. He didn't yell. He didn't retaliate. But the way he looked made the entire lobby hold its breath. "Are you okay?" Miranda asked softly. Darius nodded. "I'm fine. I've lived through this before. But it always leaves a scratch." He paused for a second, then allowed himself a faint smirk. "Only difference is, this time, I had witnesses." Just then, a soft click echoed through the lobby, quiet as a pin drop. Everyone turned. Brooke Manning, still standing behind the reception desk, had just dropped her phone. The screen was still glowing, showing a video recording in progress. Her wide, panicked eyes said everything. She had been filming the entire thing. Miranda stepped slowly toward the reception desk, not bothering to ask, she simply extended her hand. "Let me borrow your phone for a moment." Brooke froze, then silently handed it over. Miranda watched the video for a few seconds, then passed the phone to Vega. "Officer Vega, can you forward this to Internal Affairs?" Naomi nodded slowly, her face tight with tension. Dalton turned to walk away, his jaw clenched like hardwood. And Travis, for the first time, was stripped of his defensive posture. He lowered his head, unable to escape the gaze of a man he had labeled suspicious just for standing in the wrong place that morning. Darius picked up the bag still lying at his feet. He was about to head toward the elevator, but paused and looked back. If she hadn't recorded it, who would have believed me? No one answered. And in that moment, silence sounded louder than any verdict. The elevator to the right dinged softly. The doors opened again, but this time, it wasn't a junior associate in a light suit or a staffer with a briefcase. It was Camilla Stone, 52, Deputy Director of Investigative Oversight for the FBI, and Darius Bennett's direct superior. She didn't need to flash a badge to establish authority. Her very presence said enough. A perfectly tailored black suit, sharp heels clicking against the cold tile floor, the sound of each step echoed like a warning. She stepped into the lobby, her eyes sweeping across the room, from Darius, to Miranda, to the 4 officers, and finally to the reception desk, where Brooke Manning stood frozen like stone. "Can someone explain what exactly is going on here?" Camilla's voice rang out, not loud, but cutting, enough to stop everyone in their tracks. Miranda stepped aside to let her speak. Officers Travis Knox and Irina Haight requested Agent Bennett sit on the ground. Then senior officers Eric Dalton and Naomi Vega arrived as backup and maintained the order, despite Agent Bennett presenting a valid federal badge. Camilla turned to Darius, who still wore the calm expression of a seasoned professional, though the exhaustion in his eyes was no longer hidden. "Are you all right? Physically?" "Yes," Darius replied. "Mentally?" "I've stopped being surprised." Camilla didn't smile. She turned sharply to face the 4 Riverdale CP officers, Dalton and Travis standing at attention, Vega and Irina with their heads slightly lowered. "I want to hear your reasons," she said. Dalton responded, his voice much quieter than when he had first stepped into the lobby 10 minutes earlier. "We received a call from the front desk reporting a black man in dark clothing, standing alone, speaking into a Bluetooth device. They said he was acting suspicious." "Did he identify himself as an FBI agent?" Camilla asked bluntly. "He did," Vega interjected, "and he presented his badge immediately." Camilla folded her arms, her gaze fixed on Dalton. "Then after verifying that, what made you decide to treat a federal agent like a suspect?" Dalton pressed his lips together. "We were following protocol. We couldn't rule out the risk." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "A risk? From someone who showed a federal ID, drew no weapon, made no threats, and did nothing but stand still?" No one answered. In the lobby, a few building employees had begun edging into corners, watching as if they were witnessing an unofficial hearing unfold. Camilla pulled out her phone, typed briefly, and raised it to her ear. "I need the Riverdale PD's Internal Affairs unit here. We're looking at a potential abuse of authority and racially biased profiling during target engagement." The words hit Dalton like a punch. He stumbled back a step, his eyes darting in disbelief. Camilla turned back to Darius, then to Miranda. "We still have a meeting upstairs on the 4th floor. But before that, I want a full review of every second of lobby security footage, and the video recorded, accidentally or not, by the receptionist." Miranda nodded. "I'll coordinate with the building's legal team." Camilla finally turned her gaze to Brooke Manning. "And you," her voice softened, but remained icy, "have a choice. You can tell the truth about what you thought you saw, or let this spiral far beyond a misjudged phone call." Brooke said nothing. Her lips were tightly pressed together. Camilla added, her tone light as a breeze but sharp enough to cut to the bone. "Agent Bennett was targeted not for his behavior, but for his appearance. And I will not allow that to pass as a misunderstanding." In that moment, the difference between power and responsibility had never been clearer. The atmosphere in the ground floor lobby of the Ashgrove building fell into a heavy silence after Camilla Stone's final words. By now, the original officers, Travis Knox and Irina Haight, had been dismissed, leaving only the 2 senior officers, Eric Dalton and Naomi Vega. From where he stood, Officer Eric Dalton looked as if the blood had drained from his face. He couldn't speak. His lips remained sealed, his eyes avoiding everyone in the room, but he couldn't avoid the gaze of the very man he had ordered to the ground, Special Agent Darius Bennett. Camilla quietly stepped toward the reception desk, resting her hand on its edge. "Brooke, do you know who Agent Bennett is?" she asked, not harshly, but in a tone that left no room to misunderstand the weight of the question. Brooke Manning swallowed hard, her eyes darting around as if searching for an invisible exit. I didn't know. He just looked out of place. I wasn't sure." Camilla said nothing further. She turned and walked back to the center of the lobby, standing next to Darius, her cold gaze sweeping over the 2 remaining officers. "Then allow me to help everyone understand better. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin folder, neatly folded and clipped with a silver paper fastener. This is a copy of a recent FBI applicant file, submitted to Human Resources 3 weeks ago, Camilla said, each word falling like a stone on the tile floor. Dalton's brow furrowed. Applicant, Officer Eric Dalton, Riverdale PD. This file was forwarded to the Candidate Analysis Division for preliminary review. And the person who signed off on it, Camilla turned, pointing to Darius, was Special Agent Darius Bennett. A cold, cutting silence swept through the lobby like winter wind against glass. Dalton froze. Darius tilted his head slightly. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. It was a direct gaze, measured, sharp, and weighted like a verdict. When I reviewed your file, I thought, this is someone with potential. You de-escalated a domestic violence case without backup, used the right level of force, and no one got hurt. That's why I moved your file to the second-round interview list. Dalton held his breath. I didn't know. Darius stepped forward. And that's exactly the problem. You didn't know. You didn't want to know. A black man standing still, wearing a Bluetooth, holding a briefcase and a badge, couldn't possibly be safe in your eyes. Because you've defined safety strictly within your own limits. Camilla followed up, her voice calm but final. Within the next hour, your file will be reviewed again, with all the new information included. That includes today's security footage. Dalton lowered his head. His gaze wandered, no longer that of a law enforcement officer, but of someone watching his career collapse under the weight of the bias he refused to acknowledge. Officer Naomi Vega slowly turned toward Darius. She bit her lip, then stepped forward and returned his badge, holding it out with both hands, respectfully. Thank you, Darius said, neither bitter nor sarcastic. At least you had the courage to take one step in the right direction, toward the truth. Camilla nodded to Miranda Carter. Let's go. We can't let one more second of injustice linger. The three of them turned and walked away, leaving behind a lobby where every gaze hung heavy with hesitation, because the man once suspected had once held the power to change the future for the very one who doubted him. The soft click of shoes echoed across the polished tile floor as Darius Bennett walked slowly toward the elevator with Camilla Stone and Miranda Carter. The air in the lobby remained thick with silence. Eyes followed his back, not with suspicion anymore, but a mix of confusion, shame, and fear of what that suspicion revealed about themselves. As the elevator doors closed, Darius leaned his head lightly against the cold steel wall. The hallway on the 5th floor opened into a strange kind of stillness. A soft ding sounded behind him, not from the elevator, but from the familiar rhythm of footsteps approaching. Naomi Vega. She looked as though there was something she needed to say. Agent Bennett, she called out as they both stopped in front of the conference room door, where everyone else was still waiting. Do you have a minute? Not as an officer. As a person. Darius glanced at the door, then turned to her. We just lived through a lesson that takes some people a lifetime to face. I guess, a minute is long enough to start. Naomi nodded. I used to think I understood. That I was different from the ones who judged too quickly. I have black friends, I read the right books, I believed I had no bias. But this morning, I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. Silence is a choice too, Darius said, his voice free of anger, just piercing in its clarity. You didn't shout, didn't oppress. But you also didn't stop it. And that silence still leaves scars. Naomi lowered her head. I know. And I'm not here to ask for absolution. I'm here to say I'm learning. And I want to learn from someone who's lived through it. Darius remained silent for a few seconds. His breath was slow and deep, as if measuring the true weight of her words. Do you know how many times I've lived through mornings like today? He asked, his voice soft as wind, yet holding the chill of many winters past. At airports. In restaurants. At conferences. Every time I get double-checked, second-guessed, called suspicious. I don't explode. I don't scream. But every time, it chips away at your sense of belonging. Naomi said nothing. Her eyes reddened, but no tears fell. And what I've learned, Darius continued, is that you can't fix what you're not willing to face. You can't reform a system if every individual in it keeps denying the role they play in the injustice. She nodded. I want to face it. Not to ease my conscience, but to change how I act next time. A brief silence followed. Then Darius stepped beside her. Then don't just apologize. Use your position to act differently. You don't have to shout, but you have to be clear. Naomi stood up straighter, as if the weight on her shoulders had just shifted into a sense of responsibility. I promise. Darius looked at her one last time before opening the door to the conference room. I'll be watching to see how that promise becomes action. Because next time, there might not be someone like me waiting patiently to be seen as human. The stone-paved courtyard outside Ashgrove Corporate Plaza was still damp with rain as Darius Bennett pushed through the glass doors. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy, like the lingering echo of the confrontation that morning. He walked slowly, not out of exhaustion, but because he knew one final conversation awaited. In the parking lot below, leaning against a patrol car, Eric Dalton stood quietly. He held his police cap loosely in one hand, his eyes no longer filled with authority, but with the uncertainty of someone seeing himself clearly for the first time. Darius approached, unhurried. They stood face to face, no greetings needed. You waited for me? Darius asked, voice low but free of contempt. Dalton nodded. I couldn't let it end like that. I figured, there's something I need to say. Darius crossed his arms. Then say it. But don't do it out of fear of losing your career. Say it because you're ready to hear the hard truths. Dalton took a breath. This morning, I responded the way I was trained. But I realized that training wasn't enough to stop me from seeing through bias. I saw the Bluetooth, the dark jacket, a black man standing alone, and my brain filled in the rest. Darius said nothing. He simply opened his bag and pulled out a stack of papers, neatly clipped. These are the interview questions I once prepared for FBI candidates, he said, placing them in Dalton's hands. All real-world scenarios. No right answers, just right responses. Dalton took them, flipping to the first page. He didn't read, but the weight of it already settled in his hands. Do I still have a chance? Dalton asked, his voice almost a whisper. Darius looked at him, not smiling, but with an honesty that held no bitterness. You do. But not from me. A real chance comes from you, from being willing to change how you see. And next time, when you walk into a room, don't just see a person. Ask yourself what you're missing. Dalton swallowed hard. I'll remember. No, Darius corrected gently, you need to do more than remember. You need to repair. Little by little. Every time, clearly enough that the person in front of you doesn't have to sit on the floor just to be believed as harmless. The wind swept through, carrying the scent of damp concrete and the weight of the morning. Dalton remained still as Darius turned and walked away, the strap of his crossbody bag swinging softly at his side, his steps steady, as though he was used to forgiving while also reminding others what's right. The final question was never spoken aloud, but Dalton knew it well. Did he just want to wear the badge, or truly deserve it? Eric Dalton turned away. The glass door behind him slid closed with a quiet sound, like a period at the end of a heavy chapter, but not necessarily the end of the story. Darius Bennett got into his car and drove off, the post-rain sun breaking through clouds, leaving faint streaks across the brick walkway. No one followed. No more apologies were offered. And perhaps no report would ever document those 7 minutes of silence, but he knew, those 7 minutes had said more than words ever could. Upstairs, the Verity Core Solutions meeting continued as if nothing had happened. Handshakes. Presentation slides. Cold numbers. But downstairs, someone had just learned a lesson no training manual would ever teach. Naomi Vega, the young officer who once stood still in the most critical moment, now sat in the patrol car. Her eyes no longer reflected someone simply doing her duty, but someone who knew she had let something wrong pass, not because she agreed with it, but because she said nothing. In law enforcement, people are trained to fear the gunshots, the shouting, the sudden flare of conflict. But the most dangerous thing, Darius knew, is silence. Silence when someone is being mistreated. Silence when you know someone is innocent, but stand aside anyway. Silence, because it's not my place. Darius paused at a street corner, his hand resting on the hood of his car as he looked back at the building. He wasn't angry. He didn't hold a grudge. But he was tired. Tired of knowing that no matter how many badges, credentials, or clearances he carried, some eyes would always view him with suspicion, just because his skin didn't change. And then, he thought of a sentence he wanted to say, not to Dalton, not to Naomi, but to anyone who had ever watched and stayed quiet. Prejudice doesn't always speak. Sometimes, it is silence. And it's silence that blinds us. He opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. Another day began. Another battle awaited. But this time, maybe, just maybe, someone who had just learned how to speak up would stand beside him. And if you've read this far, remember this. You don't need a badge or a title to tell right from wrong. You just have to stop being silent when wrong stands right in front of you. That's how change begins.